How many of you struggle with a little bit of insecurity now and then? I am horribly insecure. Just FYI. How many of you are pompous and... No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No. No, I think all of us feel insecure from time to time. And we experience or not experience things based on those insecurities. I think about all the missed opportunities I had when I was younger because I was afraid of trying out for certain things because I didn't want to be a failure. I was afraid to do certain contests because I didn't want to look stupid. I've known friends and family who would try out a sport and they would do something and people would be like, oh, I can't believe, and the teammates would pile on them a little bit verbally and then they were feeling bad and so they quit. And there's all these things because of our insecurities that we sometimes may miss out on. And other times it's, I think of, those dates where, especially guys, our egos, we can't handle, the letdown of asking someone out and them shooting us down. And so, those quote unquote missed opportunities. But, it's really funny because I was talking to a young lady not too long ago and she was questioning why this old guy asked her out. She was just being friendly. And I told her, I said, well, it's kind of the law of averages. Because what happens is when you're a guy and your ego is a little bit frail, at first, after a while, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. What do I got to lose? It's the law of averages. You ask God enough people, eventually one of them was bound to say yes. And then it's kind of like, well, those, the ones who say no, it's like, well, they're losers, or they're this, or they're that, they're crazy. It's really funny how our ego, how it plays. And sometimes we present ourselves as being so amazing, and yet inside we feel so inadequate. And I remember going out, I was with like 3 or 4 guys, and there was this one guy, and he was older, and we were at a restaurant, I think it was Salt Hill, and we were sitting, and this very attractive server comes up, and she's smiling, she's being friendly, and she's kind of joking with us. And then she goes away, and this old guy, the biggest dorky-looking dude ever, is like, hey, did you see the way she was looking at me? And I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, I think she's really into me. And I'm like, are you being serious right now? There's no way she's into you. And he's like, no, I'm going to go talk to her. And I'm like, what? And he goes and he talks to her. And he comes back with his head down just a little bit. And it's like, what are you thinking, dude? Like, you really thought she was into you? Look at her. Look at you. I didn't say that, okay? We were friends, but we weren't that close. I was talking to another guy who unfortunately had been swindled a couple times by people on the internet, by people pretending to be somebody who was dating them, and it was like they were just looking for money, and they swindled a certain amount of money off of him because there was some really attractive young lady at the other side of this anonymous thing, and she was coming to Vermont to visit him, but her car broke down and now she needed more money to get the car fixed. He's like, she's almost here. And his son was like, Dad, she's not coming. She is probably a 60-year-old dude, okay? It is not who you think. Look at you and look at that picture. And he's like hammering his dad because this is like the second time this had happened to him. And it's like, and it's like, is that your insecurities talking? Is that your ego? Like, what's going on in a person's head when we make decisions that are totally irrational? And things that, or opportunities that we have and we completely miss out on because we don't feel adequate enough. It's a really strange thing, this battle we have within ourselves. And I was thinking about this as I was part of why I'm a Christian. This is a series that we're doing right now, coming from the parable of the lost things, the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost brothers, the younger and the older brother. And this one we're going to talk about is, the story comes from the book of Judges, which is in the Old Testament. And we're going to read, I'm going to read it right now, Judges chapter 6. This is the story of Gideon. You guys know Gideon? Have you heard that? You probably have, because there's a Bible in almost every motel room placed by the Gideons. Okay, this is where it comes from, this story. The Gideon people, the group that they call themselves Gideons. And Gideon was what they called the judge. So if you follow the timeline in the Old Testament, you have, Genesis, and it's God's working through the people. The Exodus was Moses, God raising up Moses and leading the people of Israel out. Then you have Joshua, and since Moses failed to lead the people properly, Joshua came up, and he was the one who went into the promised land to conquer it. And after Joshua, after a certain number of the tribes, several of the tribes did not vanquish the people, did not push the people out or whatever they were supposed to, they end up living amongst all the people that were native to that. Well, I don't know how native they were, but they were in that land. And they started worshiping other gods, the Israelites. And so God was like, all right, enough. And he established these things called judges. And basically what they were was military rulers. Because every time Israel would mess up, he would take them into captivity. And so this time it's the Midianites. And the Midianites came and was conquering, and they were treating them very poorly. So you kind of follow that line, the timeline here? So this is the time of, Gideon's not the first judge, but he's one of these unassuming judges. So we're gonna look at this real quick. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 16. And it says, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, so God handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. And the Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders would invade from Midian and Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all their sheep, all their goats and cattle, and even their donkeys. These enemy hordes coming with their livestock and tents were as thick as locusts. They arrived in droves of camels, too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then, this is kind of like me, I think, sometimes. Then the Israelites finally cried out to the Lord for help. They basically were dying. It was like, okay, God, now, can you help us? And when they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. And he said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now live. But you have not listened to me. Then the angel of the Lord came. Now, most scholars believe that this is Jesus before he was Jesus. This is God, the Son, what we call the pre-incarnate, before Jesus came in the flesh. So oftentimes in the Old Testament, you see the angel of the Lord. The Lord is capitalized, and that means Yahweh, right? So the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree of Oprah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of the winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty hero, Yahweh is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord was with us and is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us out of Egypt, but now the Lord has abandoned us at the hands of and handed us over to the Midianites? Then the Lord turned to him and said, go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. Okay, Lord. How can I rescue Israel? First of all, my clan is the weakest of the whole tribe of Manasseh. And frankly, who's ever even heard of Manasseh? Manasseh is one of the tribes that no one even talked about. And I'm the least of my entire family. And the Lord said, yeah, exactly. Perfect. Because I will be with you. And you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. And Gideon's kind of like, right. Like, no way. And I love this story because it's so much like when I think about myself. And God calling me. Like, I grew up, I was very shy. I didn't like to be up in front of people. I know, it's weird, right? I was the youngest of 4 kids, and so, I had 2 sisters and a brother that were older than me. And my brother, growing up, he could be fun occasionally. But I knew, I learned how to respect people that were older than me because he'd always beat me up, right? And I would try to be funny or goofy or whatever, and they would give me a really hard time about it. So I was like, okay, I'm never gonna act this way around other people because, I get enough at home. I don't need it here. And so I just remember missing out on a lot of different little things, production sometimes where I may have wanted to do it, or possibly singing, or trying out for certain sports that I was afraid I wasn't going to be good at. I played certain sports that I knew I was good at and didn't want to try other ones, and all because of my own insecurities. And then, like, as a young guy, I remember thinking, I feel like God wants me to be in ministry. And it wasn't quite that sophisticated of a thought. It was more like I was thinking about, okay, God has this thing, and I want to tell people about Jesus. As a little guy, I remember inviting my friends to church at school because I was always understood that that's what Christians do. They tell people about Jesus. And so I'm this little evangelist guy talking to my friends and trying to invite them to church and trying to do things. And I think maybe out of all my friends ever came to church ever. It was for a contest, and I won a radio. I brought my Bible to church every Sunday. I got points for that. I memorized the verses, got points for that. And I brought a friend that no one else brought. Bingo, I won. Little transistor radio. It was just this one little speaker. It was cheap as all get out, but I was so stinking proud of that. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I may not be good at much, but I'm a good Christian. Yeah. And I remember as I got older and I started going into like high school and stuff, and I know this is a weird thing, but I've told you, you guys know I was always teacher's pet. Teachers loved me because I was very compliant. I'd always get the smilograms, he may not be bright, but he's wonderful, that kind of thing. And I remember, like, probably my 8th grade and my freshman year, I would say certain things under my breath because I thought it was funny, and I just kind of said it. And I remember someone laughing next to me, and I didn't know they heard what I said. And I looked at them, and they're like, they're laughing at me, looking at me, and they're like, that was pretty good. And I was like, oh, you thought that was funny? Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Well, if they thought it was funny, maybe someone else is going to think it's funny. And so I said something else, and then a couple people laughed. And I'm like, oh, snap, I'm on a roll. And I went from teacher's pet to teachers weren't too happy with me because I started being the class clown, all because of my insecurities started going away. And then it got to be where, well, I'm thinking I'm pretty funny now. And now I'm just like every class, I'm like, hey. Now I'm annoying and obnoxious. This is the human condition. We have no sense of balance, right? But yet God takes it and he's like, God, listen, Mike, just chill out, just relax, be at peace. I'm going to give you the gifts that you need to do what I've asked you to do. I am the one that's going to make you successful in what you do, not you. Now, you are going to be the person, you are going to have the personality, you are going to have the gift sets, but I promise you this. You don't get proud and egotistical because it's not you, it's me working through you. And believe me, there was times when I would get up in my especially my early youth ministry days, and I would go and speak somewhere. And I would speak to a bunch of kids, and they'd be laughing, and they would be responding really well. And I'm like, you know something? I am pretty good at this. And I would go somewhere else, and it would just be boom, flat, bad, boo. No one ever booed me, but And I was just like, oh my gosh, what happened? And it was like this little voice in me was saying, that was you. Yeah. You're not that great, okay? It's me working through you that's really good. But I'm going to use you if you're willing. And God has a way of humbling us, right, every so often. And these insecurities, which I've always had, and they've always been sitting down there, are just ready to pop up, right? And every time we do things in our own strength, I feel like that insecurity starts to pop up, and then we get really super defensive, When someone says something to us and maybe challenges us in some way, and then we're just like, you think so? Well, let me tell you something about you. I remember I had a mom once, this is many years ago, come up to me and was talking about how their daughter was having a problem with something going on in the youth group, and I was super defensive, and I was, talking, and I'm trying not to cast dispersion on anyone, but I'm asking questions about their family life and stuff. And I'm just like, oh. Afterward, I was like, that was really ridiculous. I got to go and apologize to that person and own the fact that I was being super defensive. You see, because that's what we do when we're doing things in our own strength, right? All those insecurities start to overflow, pop out of us again, and then we start to bellyache about this person, this situation, and that situation. And God's like, listen, you're getting nothing done this way. I've got so much I want you to accomplish, but you have to do it in my strength. And this is Gideon. Gideon is like, he's like, God, you got to be kidding me. Okay, first of all, I'm from the tribe of Manasseh. We're the least of the tribes. Then my family's the least of the families in the tribe. And then me, look at me. I'm little. I'm chicken. I'm hiding. I'm trying to hide food so I can eat. And I'm just minding my own business. And God's like, exactly. I don't know how many times I've asked somebody about maybe leading something like a Bible study and it's like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm not asking you to get deep theological. I'm just saying, hey, you want to read a few verses with, no. First of all, I got to pray out loud. You want me to pray out loud? No. How many of you love to pray out loud? Nobody? Yeah. Why? Because everybody's listening. I remember I had one pastor, and he would always like pause during his prayers, and he'd be like, and it was like this exhale. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord above. And he would start just waxing eloquent. And I would be like next to pray. All right, God, how you doing? Just Mike here. You remember me. And it's like, I'm trying to be so eloquent, and I'm just like, that's not me. I'm not eloquent. That's not who I am. I didn't, I obviously had to take classes on public speaking in college and stuff like that, but I was never the eloquent one. I was like the funny one or whatever. I was the one who could relate to some people, and other people were just like, he's a little goofy. He's a little too goofy to be preaching. Because preaching is a serious business. And people need Jesus, and he's being a goofball. I had one pastor tell me that, well, you're kind of an entertainer. Somehow I think that was a backhanded compliment. I don't like this fact. It's telling me I'm an entertainer. I'm not an entertainer. I'm a pastor. And she was a pastor, and she was telling me this, and I was like, I don't think so. Am I? In all that stuff, and you know the tape that runs in your head. And when someone says those words, whatever those words are for you, whatever the topic is, whatever that topic is for you, whatever that complaint is, whatever that situation is in your life, and you hit play, And all that tape starts running through your head. And all the people in your background who have said certain things to you starts running through your head. And then you respond with all the emotion and insecurity and pride and everything else. And it just flows out of us. And it all happens to all of us. And God's like, listen, you need to hold back and talk to me, because I am the one who loves you. I am the one who created you. I know people have said things to you inappropriately. I know people have treated you wrongly, but I have always been with you. And I've always loved you, and I've always been there to help you. And the fact is that everybody in life is going to face these things from time to time. We all are. Every single one of us is going to be able to have somebody in our background that we can point to and say, they're the reason I'm the way I am. We can all say it. At least one. There's probably more than that. So you're the reason why I'm this way. Or I'm bald because of you. That might be a hard one, but I still have said it. And so Gideon, this is what Gideon does. Gideon's like, okay, God, you want me? Okay, we'll take them out. I mean, these guys are huge. Okay, I'm going to talk to these guys. Okay, I'm going to get soldiers, because there was no real centralized government in Israel at the time. It was before the monarchs. They've had a couple of judges beforehand, and it was, with mixed results. So he goes out and he recruits about 33,000 men. And it's like, this is small, God. This is a small army compared to they're like locusts. There's just tens of thousands of these people all along the hillside, just coming down, marauding, just running back, coming down, just hanging out, eating everything, killing. It was horrible. And God's like, no, Gideon, that's too many. What do you mean too many? No, it's too many. He said, tell everyone who doesn't want to fight to leave. Against that horde? They're not going to want to fight. 20,000 people or 23,000 men left when he said, anyone who doesn't want to fight, leave. He was left with like 3,000 men. God's like, too many, Gideon. Too many? That's crazy. Yeah, too many. He was left with 300 men. And the way he went down, he divided all the troops up, and he was like, have them go down and drink water and see what they do. And so they divided them up into two different teams, and the first team goes down there, they're really hot, and they just plop their face in the water and start drinking. They're just guzzling, He's like, and then the other group was like looking, and they were cupping water in their hands, and they were bringing it and they kept looking. He's like, okay, those guys that plunged their heads, get rid of them. So 300 guys were left. Just 300 against this crazy amount of soldiers. And then God told him to go out there, and he says, just take the ram's horn and a torch, and when you give the signal, you put your men around the camp, blow the horn, and say, for God and for Gideon, and start making some noise. And they start clanging these cymbals and blowing the horn, and they have lights, and the whole army of Midian they freaked out, first of all, because they thought it was more people, and they started to end up fighting each other instead of, it was just this complete chaos, and they started running away, and these 300 guys were chasing after this huge group of men, running away because God was with him, and they had victory over the Midianites. And then it was like Midian was standing there like, this wasn't me. I didn't want anything to do with this. I am just, you know what Midian did before he allowed God to use him? Sorry, what did I say, Midian? You know what, Gideon, they were cousins, okay? In fairness, Midian and Gideon. Gideon was like, okay, God, I believe that you want me to do this, but hold on. Now that we know the end result, he doesn't know what's going to happen, right? He's like, all right, listen, I'm going to bring you an offering, all right, and I want you to to show yourself to be God. So Gideon brings this offering to God, and God sends down, consumes it all. Okay, that was cool. I mean, it was cool. That was pretty impressive. Fire down from heaven. All right, that's really great. But let me tell okay, I got one. I'm going to have this fleece. This is like this wool piece of skin. He's like, I want to put this on the ground. I said, okay, God, listen. Now, if this is really you talking to me, I want you to saturate this fleece with water and have all the rest of the ground dry around it. So Gideon goes to bed. He wakes up in the morning, and the fleece is soaking wet, and everything else is dry. He's just wringing it out, and he's like, okay. That's pretty good. All right, that's pretty good. All right, but wait. Anybody could have come along and spilt water on it. Okay, this time, this needs to be completely dry, the fleece, and all the ground around it soaking wet. So Gideon goes to bed, he wakes up in the morning, and it's just all wet everywhere, and that thing is bone dry. And he's like, okay, now I'll do it. I mean, God is really patient. This is the beautiful thing about God, is that he loves us. And we have all these insecurities, and we have all these struggles that we go through, and God's like, listen, I am with you. And I know you can blow it, and I know that you don't always trust me the way that you should or the way that you can, but I want to prove to you that I am God and that I love you. And so we ask for things, and we do things, and we try to live, and things go, sometimes they go the way we want them to go, and it's like, oh, wow, God's really good. And then things go badly or the way we don't want them to go, and it's like, oh, God really isn't so good. Or like, oh, I must be doing really well right now because things are going well for me, and, oh, man, God must be punishing me. And we've got this really swinging emotional state, and most of it's because of our own insecurities. And God's like, listen, I want you to understand. And the reason why he includes these things in Scripture, these stories of these people who were just as frail as all of us, and yet God was able to do amazing things through them and in them just by being willing. And all those things that we go through, and the ups and downs, and it can be so good at times and then feel so bad other times. And God's like, listen, I just need you to trust me. You've done things your way, and it doesn't work out well. I want you to try my way. And I want you to do it. I want you to try to live life this way, not just try it a couple of times or for a year. All right, God, I'll give you a year. And if it works out the way I want it to, then bingo. If not, then no. If you want to read about the judges, the whole book of Judges is about the judges. So it's really easy to find in the Old Testament. But it's really interesting to see. And Gideon being a great example of people like ourselves, well, most of us, who aren't necessarily the most secure in feeling like we're the greatest Christians around. And God's like, listen, I'm not interested in you being the greatest Christian around. I'm interested in you having a relationship with me and being willing and open to what I have for you. And then you will be what I need you or want you to be. All right, let's pray.